Groovy. First and foremost, Chodesh Tov, everybody. We are, oh, we keep on losing.
Chodesh Tov.
Yeah, happy Elul. Tonight starts the first day of Elul. Rosh Chodesh started yesterday evening, but it was the last day of Av. The Arizal, the Isaac Luria says actually it's most likely Yonek. It's drawing its sustenance and its energy from both months' sensibilities. But we're heading full on into Elul, and I think it's quite appropriate that we're starting this series, Rosh Chodesh Elul, because Elul is the time that is designated for Teshuvah. And we're going to be looking, and this session especially is going to set the setting, establish the setting, set the framework for the practice and the process of Teshuvah during this time period. And we're going to explore some of the tension because Teshuvah is theoretically a lifelong practice. It is definitely something you're supposed to do all the time. I would say it's the central spiritual practice of Judaism. And yet, there's a special time that is devoted to our intensive engagement with it. I mean, much like you'd say, like spiritual joy is something that we should have all the time. But the holidays are times that we designate for special joyous times, right? Vayisa'ach sameach. We should be joyous in these holidays. Even though we know we're supposed to daven, we're supposed to pray out of joy, but still, I think there's something that is really powerful about what I would call the pedagogy of the Jewish calendar. That it establishes a training framework for times for us to be able to dig deeply and engage robustly and rigorously with different aspects of what it means to be a human being, different aspects of what it means to be a Jew, different aspect of what it means to be an ensouled person, a person with a soul. They're kind of like rehearsals for, if you ever have been in a play or something like that, you rehearse and you practice different aspects of what it means to be playing this role. You can't just take it on all at once. So this is our training period for an intensive time of what it means to introspect, to look inward, and to take very seriously what it means to have a conscience, what it means to be a person with responsibilities and obligations, but also somebody with a sense of morality. And I would say I would call Teshuvah, and especially the practices around Elul, are designed to help support us and to spark those processes and those practices. I think there's I think this is a through line we've seen when we learn together that halacha doesn't just have important content in it, but it actually sets the framework for developing your faculties, like your ability to learn things on your own. Halacha isn't just like a set of rules. Halacha is a set of practices that help teach you and help you grow, so that you then are the kind of person that can find these things as you live, find these things in the warp and the woof of your own living. So I hope everyone, if you go to the chat, there's a link to a Sefaria source sheet, which you can open up, but I'm going to be sharing screen too, in case you are not able to. So you'll have it as I share it. But we'll be looking at these texts that I think really set the framework for what it means for Teshuvah as a spark of self-awareness, or what I call Teshuvah as a kind of awakening. And we'll see that it's actually quite explicit in the literature. So let's look at this. Oh. I updated my computer recently, so I need to give. Oh, interesting. Oh, no.
Do you want me to share my screen for you?
Oh, that's an idea. Sure. I will make you a co-host, I guess.
No, just enable multiple screen.
Ah, and multiple participants can share simultaneously. All right, I enabled that. Incredible. Incredible. Okay, and I think it's still recording. But okay, so can you scroll down a little bit so we can see the, there we go. Okay. Ouch, Ben, harsh. I'm not a boomer. I'm not. Okay, if you can make the font just a little bit smaller so we can see the Hebrew too. If not, we can just focus on the English. Good times. All right, there we go. So here, okay, so it's good. Don't hit the X. Don't hit the X. So here, I think we see a really interesting tension that we're going to see in the Rambam, and it's I think the tension I was trying to describe before. Namely, you can look at Jewish practice, right, as a set of rules that are imposed upon us. As you know, and the meaning of it is just that you're supposed to be obedient. You're supposed to be, a good boy. You're supposed to do the thing. But Rambam, Maimonides, right, the 12th century Spanish-Egyptian scholar and doctor, philosopher, he actually wants to intervene in that idea and say, yes, you could see the calendar as just being some kind of objective thing, but you can also see how there is a remez, a hint of some deeper, more substantive meaning that we can explore. So it says, even though the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is a biblical decree, it still tells us something, right? It's still trying to do something to us, trying to tell us something. Wake up, sleepers, from your sleep, and slumberers, arise from your slumber. Search your ways and return in Teshuvah and remember your Creator. Okay, so just pause for a second. So Rambam is saying that the shofar, which we blow on Rosh Hashanah, but also worth noting, which we start blowing on Rosh Chodesh Elul, which we start blowing the shofar tomorrow morning, is supposed to do something. And what is it supposed to do, says Rambam? What's it supposed to serve as? In a way, it's, yeah, Lauren?
Sorry. It awakes you for Teshuvah. It startles you awake and say, wow, time to start Teshuvah.
Okay, good. So, I mean, if you were to analogize it to something, it's like a spiritual alarm clock, right? The metaphor he uses is that we are, as it were, sleeping. We're drowsy. And the shofar jolts us awake. Now, I think there's something actually really powerful about this. A number of things. One is that it's a very powerful image that's being used. That we are sleepwalking, as it were, through life. And what we have every year when Elul starts is the interruption of God's shofar to help jolt us into awareness. I think that there's something that's very insightful here, that this is following after a time period in which we deprived ourselves of many things, of meat, of wine, of parties, of things like that. Or if you want to think of it in contemporary terms, living in quarantine, one day really feels like the next in a lot of ways. It's really easy just to kind of feel like you're floating along and the days don't really have much significance. I know, some days are definitely harder than others in that regard. Some months are harder than others. But what we have in the shofar is God's intervention in giving us a practice that jolts us awake, that jars us from this soporific rhythm, this sleepwalking slumber. I think another thing that's really meaningful here is that it's not just the idea of being awoken, like this ought that we have newly imposed on us. Oh, I should be awake. I should be aware. My conscience should be jolted and arisen by now. but it's actually a physical, sonic, material change in our lives. The shofar is loud and it's blaring. It's not like a pretty sound. It is intentionally using our human ears and our habits to actually influence the way that we feel, to influence the way that we live. It's a sound that does something specifically to human beings. There was a couple parshas ago, there's Moses recounts going to get the Torah, and a lot of midrashim imagine the angels opposing it, saying, like, what are you talking about? We are so much holier than Moses. Why is it this like flesh bag, right? This meat sack is getting the Torah. And God says back, I mean, the first commandment I gave was to be fruitful and multiply. Are you fruitful and multiplying, angels? Do you covet your neighbor's spouse? Do you steal? Do you murder? Do you curse others? No. The Torah is specifically designed for human beings. It is designed to reach us where we need to be reached and to help us get where we need to go. The shofar specifically helps us because the sound startles us and it jolts us awake. So Torah is a deeply human and I think attentive thing. And the shofar is a great example of a tool that is specifically designed to help us. It is not like up there in airy-fairy spiritual idea land. It's down here, made out of an animal's horn, kind of like a grisly object. It's a visceral object. We're going to get into the primordial nature of the shofar, that there's something that is anti-cultural about it. It is natural. It is primeval, right? It reaches something deep, deep within us, elemental. It helps jostle us awake. So it's this alarm clock that helps us get awake. Now, though it says, those who forget the truth amidst the futility of the moment and are infatuated all their years with, sorry, this is a publicly owned translation. I don't have time to write them all myself. Infatuated all their years with vanity and nothingness. That will not help and will not save. Examine your souls and improve your ways and your motivations. Look at yourself, look at what you do, and think about why, right? Look at yourself, the space in which things occur, the results of who it is that you are, and the motivations that produce those results. We're tracking it all the way back to its source, from effect to the cause, right? It's actually, I mean, it's relevant that Maimonides was a philosopher because this actually maps to Platonic speculation, right? That Plato talked about. You actually track, you attend to an object, and then you think about the cause of that object, and the cause of that, and the cause of that, and the cause of that. This is in Symposium. And eventually it brings you back to the source. And that's actually what we do with us as well. We look at who we are and what we do. We think about why. We think about why is that the case? Why is that? Why is that? There's actually really beautiful therapeutic reading that in Hasidism by the Baal Shem Tov, that we look at like things we do, even like nasty things or like sinful things, and then we think of why, and we think of why, we think of why, and eventually we're actually able to find its source in holiness, in God, right? If we, the classic examples, you look at like someone having lustful thoughts, and then they think of like, why am I having lustful thoughts? And they're like, what is about that is inspiring this within me? And then you track that reaction all the way back to like an appreciation of beauty, a yearning for closeness. And eventually you're actually able to find it in its holy source. I think the shofar is doing that as well. I think something else that's really powerful about the shofar is its force. It moves us. It startles us. And when you're startled, you know, like you are moved. You know, someone scares you. You know, like you're living, you're moving along, you're sleeping, having a nice relaxing evening. It's like, bam! Suddenly you're awake. And the shofar moves us. Evolution has primed us to move when we are scared, for good reason. There is a certain urgency that compels us at a very basic level. And I think the moving is really important and the force is really important because you need that distance to be able to reflect. If your face is pushed up against a wall, you can't see the wall. You need distance to be able to see. You need a medium through which to perceive. Sound waves need air through which to travel. That's why when you plug your ears, you can't hear because you don't have air anymore. Now, light doesn't need air. Light can travel in a vacuum, but still you need distance to be able to see because you need to be able to take in the object as such. You need distance from yourself. The shofar startles us to move, to distance ourselves from ourselves, to be able then to look at ourselves, to productively objectify ourselves. Freeze ourselves in this moment in time. So, okay, up till now, who am I, where am I? There's that classic mushal in physics, right? The particle is traveling down the road and the cop pulls it over and says, "Excuse me, Mr. Electron, do you know how fast you were going?" And the electron says, "No, but I know exactly where I was." Ha 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 ha. Nerds. No, okay, explain. The joke is the observer's paradox. Namely, the way to observe a subatomic particle is you need to bombard it with energy, which means that then you give it more energy so it goes faster. So the only way to actually see it is to actually then impact it in some way or another. It's the observation paradox, right? To look at something, you change it. Thank you. Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Maxine, the student with the wisdom. Thank you, Maxine. It's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And we are uncertain about ourselves. We are in a time of uncertainty about ourselves. And you need to look at yourself to be able then to observe, to have a cheshbon nefesh, which we're going to talk about in future weeks, to do a self-accounting. But to start to look at yourself is the first moment then of change. You can't look at yourself without changing. But it's good, because the whole point is to be able then to see yourself. You have changed from somebody who is moving forward, who is immediately sunk within the state of who you are and what you're about, to gaining distance from yourself, to be able then to reflect on who you are, to take an account of who you are, and to make some decisions. To analyze yourself, and to do some reflection. So I want to go down a little bit. I want there's something very powerful about this that I think the Toldos Yaakov Yosef gets. Namely, before we look at the text, let's see if we can intuit it. Regarding the shofar, what's the mitzvah?
Hearing.
Hearing. Hearing the shofar is the mitzvah. Okay, Maxine, what does that mean to you?
Wow. I guess that means, really taking notice and paying attention to it. It's something that comes from outside. Like, it's not something that I'm actively doing. Well, I could, and I've been practicing, but what's important isn't actually like the production of the sound, it's the perception of it.
Ooh, so nicely put. It's not the production of the sound, but the perception of it. I think it's a very, very powerful, and I would even say kind of democratic point. Not everyone needs to be a Jewish professional to do Teshuvah. The shofar is blown. The mitzvah is to hear it. The mitzvah is to bring yourself to it. The mitzvah is to let it move you. to see what it can do for you, do to you, to let the sound move you. Everyone does not need to own a shofar. Not everyone needs to be a trumpet player. But everyone needs to hear the music. You need to hear the sound. So the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, Yaakov Yosef Polnoya, one of the Baal Shem Tov's main disciples, says, in the words of the Rambam, we can understand that the mitzvah isn't to blow the shofar, but to hear it. That is to say, it is through hearing the sound of the shofar that the sleeping are able to be awoken, and the slumberers can return in Teshuvah. I think something really powerful that Maxine said was that it's about perception. And that's something that everyone is able to do. Because the point isn't, am I able to like be the virtuosic shofar player who can blow the shofar the exact right way? You know, there's all these like mystical ideas of like the kavanos, the mystical intention meditations of like blowing the shofar, of the person who's able to use the shofar to impact heaven in some way. We're going to actually see a text about that below. But that's like the, you know, like the elite of the elite of the elite or what have you, but that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to listen to it and to see what meaning you can make from it. Right? The sound is there. And the question is, what's it going to do to you specifically? How does it impact you? The sound is undifferentiated. It's a kol pashut. It's a simple sound. And so because it's so simple, kind of like an ink blot test, the question is, how is it then going to cast a reflection on us? The array of light that freezes the particle in place, right? The sound blares at us and it freezes us in place so we can get a snapshot of who the heck we are right now. So we know what it is we need to work with, who it is we need to work on. Francis, do you want to say this out loud? I think you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just think it also means that one has to be in a Jewish environment, in a synagogue, that I haven't been into one for many months, to hear a shofar being blown. I mean, it's probably, there's nobody in my house doing this. So we have to be in our community, I think.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, and it's a challenge right now because I think a lot of us, like I was saying, the mitzvah is to hear the shofar, but not everyone can play shofar, can blow shofar. So I'll say now that I am going to, once I scolded myself last Erev Shabbos, so I'm not totally out and about yet. But once I am healed, I'm going to go get the shofar from the shul, and I'm happy to hop on my bike and blow the shofar at least once during Elul, to make sure that people can start hearing it in person. Not a big deal. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. But second of all, as Susie just said, there's also you can listen to it online if you're not able to hear it in person. I think a lot of people can appreciate. I think we can use the tools we have in the internet and things like that, especially nowadays when in-person community is much more complicated to access. So you can hear, YouTube. I'm sure there are live streams of it. I'm sure Chabad is making that happen. Once I have a shofar, I'm also happy to blow it for you on the phone or I'll on Facebook Live, Facebook videos or what have you. So there are definitely ways to at least have a virtual experience for sure. Or you can use that air horn, like blah, blah, blah type of thing, if you're not able to find a shofar sound. And also, it's interesting to note, yeah, you can find the shofar ringtone, good point. One sec, I think we might have extra peeps trying to get in. Oh, no, we're good. Also, actually, I didn't include this, but shofar actually in gematria is also the word God, too. It's the word Elohim. So there's something I think also of, again, like the actual sound of the shofar, the loudness of the blaring, the rudeness, the crudeness of the sound is, I think, really important and very valuable. But I would say if we can also use this time in Elul to find as many different ways to jolt ourselves awake as we can, right? That the shofar exists to have this result, to jostle us, to get us out of our sleepwalk. So easy for, especially, I think like quarantine has showed us just how easy it is for life to become undifferentiated and kind of like what it means just kind of get by. But Elul is about unlearning how to survive and relearning how to thrive, right? It's about really committing ourselves to what it means to live the lives that we know we can, to the capacity that we know we're able, the life that we truly want. Okay, I'm going, Susie, can you scroll down just a little bit more? Great, so I'm just gonna look at yeah, that's perfect. Actually, you can go up a little bit. Great, okay, so speaking of awakening, there's also a practice during Elul for Sephardim, starting Rosh Chodesh Elul and Hasidim, and then for Ashkenazim, starting the week before Rosh Hashanah, to get up either early in the morning or stay up late at night and say special prayers called slichos, because it is a time, this kind of like half awake time is this kind of magical, bleary, mystical, magical time in which you're able to feel, it's like outside of regular life. It's the gloaming of the dusk or the gloaming of the dawn. It's a time that feels like not quite real or super real, hyper real. And that's a time where like the Kabbalah says actually that's a special time of favor. It's a special time of a closeness and affection between reality and God. And also Elul is a special time of affection because it's also the time that Moses was on the mountain getting the second tablets, which were a gift of love from God to us. God could have just tossed us away after we strayed, but instead, Moses shattered the tablets. Okay, that's it, we're done. But no, the second tablets are the recommitment to a relationship. So those 40 days are a time of favor, of affection. And Elul has two really powerful acronyms that are associated with it. One is Ani Ladodi Vidodi Li. See this right here. Ani Ladodi Vidodi Li. That's from Shir HaShirim, from Song of Songs. And if you look at the first letter of each of those words, Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed, it spells out Elul. And not only that, but in this week's Parsha, can you go down a little bit, please? No, never mind. In Ha'azinu, the second to last part, Vayelech, the third to last part of the Torah, it says, and this is a pasuk that shows up all over Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Umal Hashem and in the Slichos, Umal Hashem Elokechas Levavcha ve'es Levav Zerecha li'ahavaz Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha l'man chayecha. God will circumcise, right? Will peel away the tough outer covering of your heart and the heart of your descendants to love God with all of your heart and all of your soul so that you can live. So here we have another acronym. It's, listen, I'm not like somebody who's like I'm not like, it's just really cool. It's just really neat. Like, Elokecha es levavcha v'es levav, right? Your heart and the heart of your descendants, Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed, again, we just see these things pop up. Elul, again, you can say like, oh, whoa, Bible codes. Or you can like say, the point is that like you flip it and say Elul is a time where we associate these feelings with the month. Namely the feeling of intimacy and closeness with God. And the feeling also that the point of Teshuvah is to resensitize yourself, to divest your heart of its hard candy shell so that it's able to feel again. L'ma'an chayecha, so you can live. Teshuvah is l'chaim, right? Teshuvah is about recommitting to life and to living, not just getting by, but really living. That's what Teshuvah is about. And what that means is resensitizing yourself, learning how to feel again. So much of our lives, I think we train ourselves to, we turn the volume down. We tamp down those feelings of regret. We tamp down those feelings of disappointment because they're really hard. And the way to then cope with those feelings is then to numb yourself further because they're really hard to face. But Teshuvah gives us this amazing double movement. On one side is the commitment or the demand, the insistence is maybe, I think, a better word, that we do this work of introspection, this work of recommitting to our authentic selves. But the second part of it is that, yes, and the time to do it is the time of closeness, of support, of intimacy and affection. Because it says in the Gemara, Kol hamitayr Messiah lo. Anyone who comes to cleanse themselves, God helps them. This is not something we're doing because we are broken and bad and defective. It's something we're doing because we have a partnership with God to do this work of growth. We have support from God to do it. Teshuvah is not proof positive of our failures as a person. It is an opportunity to develop as people, to do the holy work of change, and to feel closest, actually, in doing so. It says, the Baal Teshuvah can stand where the Tzaddik Gamor, the completely righteous person, cannot. That makes no sense, unless you knew the thing about the angels before. It's not about being perfect. It's not about being already there. It's about the process of what it means to get there. It's about the commitment and about the moving. Teshuvah is about motion. It's about moving yourself towards where you want to go. It's that growth that's the ikr, that's the essence, not the status. Now, obviously you shouldn't go off and sin so then you can do teshuvah. We're not Sabbateans here. But what it means to be human, right, is to slip, to fall, it's to fail. Teshuvah is the most human thing of all, which makes it the most divine, and vice versa. L'ma'an chayecha. This is what living is. Living is not pulling away from it when you feel disappointed, but turning back towards it so you can make change. It means to be truly alive. Franz Rosenzweig, the 20th century German philosopher, actually started his book from death and then ended the book to life. L'chaim, or l'ma'an chayecha. It's a constant cycle. It's a constant process of what it means to look at the ways in which we're not where we want to be, and to lovingly, and with the loving support of God, recommit ourselves to the lifelong practice of what it means to try to make positive and life-affirming changes in our lives. The Kotzker Rebbe asked a really interesting kasha. He said, why is it the case that in the Shema, it says, V'samtem al levavchem? This is one of my favorite Torahs. I'm sure I've said it before. Well, I say you should, in the Vayam Shema, the second paragraph of the Shema, says, you shall place these words on your hearts. Why doesn't it say in your heart? Because just as this pasuk intuits, and this is actually where Paul gets it, the circumcision of the heart actually comes from Deuteronomy. Take that, New Testament. What it means to live is to develop this tough skin on your heart, this desensitization, the scar around your heart. Because there's so much hurt in life. So much is painful. So much sucks. So to survive, we develop this shell to protect ourselves, or we think we're protecting ourselves, but really we're defending ourselves, or we're removing ourselves, we're detaching ourselves. But when our hearts break open, that's when the words can filter in. Elul is a time of that heartbreak. What it means to break open your heart to feel life again in its fullness, which takes immense amounts of courage and resilience, which is why I think, again, there's that necessary corollary of support, of the undergirding comfort and affection and sympathy, pathos, or even empathy that God has with us and for us during this process. Or we're in these 7 weeks of nechimta, shiva de nechimta, the 7 weeks of comfort, haftorahs that insist that we are in a long-term, mature relationship with God that can survive. And like any mature relationship is one that's able to contain and tolerate times of distance and disappointment because there's a love, a healthy love that undergirds and holds it. All right, thoughts before we move forward in the text? All right, Susie, if you would. Thank you very much for this, by the way. Your nimble adaptation to my...
To say when.
Yeah, let's go to the next, yeah, to up a little bit more so we have the Hebrew and the English. Beautiful, that's great. Okay. If you hit the OK at the bottom of the screen, I think I should give us a little more room on the screen too. Right there. Yeah. There we go. Great. Okay. Now we have a little more flexibility. All right. So this is from the Kesser Shem Tov, which is a post-mortem collection of teachings from the Baal Shem Tov, from the founder of Hasidism, Yisrael ben Eliezer, 1700, 1760, the charismatic teacher that changed the entire Jewish world. Really incredible. So, and like many actually incredible spiritual teachers, he was somebody who was really a virtuoso of the parable. He could take these powerful spiritual ideas and translate them into very relatable kind of snapshots of life that could help us understand what life with God is like. But interestingly, I think there's a kind of radicalism there that to translate theology to real life would then to say theology, right, our relationship with God is not dissimilar from the way we feel in our relationship in the world. Right? Our love relationships, our parental relationships, our spousal relationships, our friend relationships, are relevant data for what it means to have this relationship with God. Now, they're not the same, obviously, but they're analogous, right? They give us insight. So here's a really, I think, very interesting point he makes. Someone want to read this one? Yeah, I can do it. Okay. From the best. I'm going to do it in Hebrew, but I'll translate as we go. It's short. Because it's a play on words that I think really, actually, you need to know. We're going to do a little bit of grammar. Grammar, very spiritual. You need to know grammar. All right. Meha best, from the Baal Shem Tov. Simply the best. Bester than all the rest. Inin anesu. Shenitzchadesh davar b'fam arisha in ala teva. Nikra nes. Yachar kach. Nasazet teva gamkein. Regarding miracles, what is miracle? It is when something is innovated one time within nature, and it's called a miracle. Like, whoa, something miraculous happened. But then once the seed of the miracle has been planted, it then becomes natural itself. It then becomes incorporated within the natural system. Okay. So let's then, like with the Baal Shem Tov does, let's translate this to human experience. Okay, like, yeah, fine, the splitting of the Red Sea. We know seas don't split all the time. That's not what he means. I think that what he means is, or actually, what is he trying to get at here? What is he trying to get at about the, let's call it the ever-absorptive nature of nature, or of the natural? I think he's talking about novelty, right? Nit chadesh, when something is innovated, something happens for the first time, the shine wears off. Once it happens, it's happened already. It has precedent now. So if it happens again, it can't be a miracle. Now it's just nature. Right? Once the precedent has been set, now it's been incorporated within the natural system. So then again, let's translate this to human experience. Once something amazing happens to you, it changes your life. And then the second time it happens to you, you're like, oh, right, yeah, sure, fine. Oh, yeah, that happens sometimes. I think we've all had these revelatory experiences, and you like leave them feeling changed. And yet you're still, and yet your life doesn't change. You're still the same schmo. Like, you know, you wake up and you have this every Shabbos this happens to me. I'm away from my computer. I can't like waste time on the internet. I read like 5 books. And then like Sunday rolls around and I'm like hungover from reading. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do anything. Real life takes over very quickly. Again, regular life regularizes. It habituates. Then Baal Shem, this was like a point he came back to again and again. He looked at the image or this incredible text, you know, of the vision of Ezekiel at the river of Euphrates. The God's chariot descends, and it says the Chayos Ratzov Shov, the wheelie angels were going hither and thither. He's like, why were they going Ratzov Shov? He says, because the nature of experience, of spiritual experience, is that of difference. Because if you were always riding high on God, you would eventually basically develop a tolerance for it. Kind of like a substance. You know, and you need more and more booze, more and more smack, whatever it is to get that feeling. You're an addict of life. Life is addictive because it's so easy to get used to it. It's so hard to feel that high. So it's necessary in life to actually have this gradient of experience so that you can maintain a recognition of something's specialness. Yeah, Susie, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
Thank
You're
you.
now unmuted.
Thank you. So that makes me wonder about blowing the shofar every day for a month. Because so as someone who didn't grow up Orthodox, I only hear it like on Rosh Hashanah, right? And so it's like super special, 2 days, woohoo, the shofar. But if you hear it every day for a month, then doesn't it just kind of be like, they're blowing a shofar. It's kind of noisy. Wish that would stop.
Cut it out. I want to sleep. I want to go back to sleep. I don't want to be awake. 5 more minutes. No, but like, I mean, you're right. I would say yes, but we don't blow it the rest of the year. So like, it's a special month, right? It's a special designated time for it. But you're right, and I think that exact challenge is precisely what the Baal Shem Tov is about to get at. So I think that intuition is quite on point. So again, like interestingly, the Baal Shem Tov's point maps to Teshuvah. Movement, motion is the point of meaning. Meaning only matters. Meaning only occurs if there's moving. If you're just at the same place again and again and again and again, it means nothing. Really, the point is is the motion to get there. Is the change that you undergo as you become different, as you change states. If we could just like miraculously teleport to being a tzaddik would mean nothing. It has to mean something. But you're absolutely right. Anything special, and this is exactly what he gets at, the nature of nature is to take the shine off the apple. Something becomes normal. It normalizes. Normalize this, right? And that's a challenge, I think, for our awakened soul. It's a challenge for what it means to stay awake, because it's so easy just to file it back in your brain. It's like, oh yeah, that happens sometimes. Or it's just one iteration of a thing that keeps on occurring. Its impactful force is lessened and it tampers. So how do we then maintain the meaning that events can have in our lives? Meaningful events. The answer is I think that's exactly the challenge that Suzu was getting at. Yeah, we blow the shofar, and then it just becomes annoying. Or it becomes something that you just have to do every day. But that was then also even the tension that Rambam was anticipating. Yeah, fine, it's a gzeras hakasuv. The Torah tells us to do it, but still, it needs to be something that is meaningful. It can't just be a habit or an external obligation on us that we feel compelled to do. It needs to be something that awakens something inside of us. So what do we do? So here's what he gets at. So v'zeh shekasuv, tiku b'chodesh shofar. This is why the pasuk says in Psalms 81:4, blow the shofar in the month. V'hikshed havalei lamemar, and so one could pose a challenge. It should have said, it could have said, tiku shofar bichadash. Why does it say blow the shofar anew? Right, just that once. I think that's what you get here. Chadash is something that can only occur once, because once it comes again, it's not new anymore. New things can only happen once. Ufeirush, ki yir'a adam tadir sheyeh b'chodesh, because one must always see oneself unnewing. So I think the key is chodesh is the word for month, but I think the joke here, and here's the diktuk, here's the grammar. In Hebrew grammar, the word for a gerund or a participle has the vav there, like kotev. It means writing, right? Ochel, eating. It's the present participle in Hebrew. Chodesh is renewing. You need to not just have something new happen, you need to renew it again and again and again, which means that's your work, is perception, just as Maxine said earlier. The sound is given to you. What you find in it is up to you. The shofar blasts you awake. But awakeness and awareness is nothing but what you do with it. You are jostled awake. That is what is given to you by the virtuosic shofar blower. But the shofar blower cannot make you aware. It can only make you awake. R'solomar, that is to say, L'chadesh ma'asim tovim shelo yeh kemo chok kavua. To renew your good deeds, or I would say your l'ma'an chayecha, your actualized self, so that it doesn't just become a rote behavior. It doesn't become a fixed rule, a rote obligation, an external necessity. It is an internal movement that is deeply personal to you, because you need to renew what it is that makes you you. The best and the most of what and who you are. That's the work of Teshuvah. You're awake so you can live. Yeah, Chodesh is the present participle of Chadash, of Lechadesh. Yeah. I mean, it's such like a simple or subtle thing he's getting at. But b'chodesh shofar, that the shofar shows us that our work is to renew ourselves, to commit to the newness. Because it's so easy for the newness to fade, for the novelty to fade. But that's the invitation for you to make something new, to find something new, to find a new curvature in your soul that you need to explore, to find a new aspect of your life that you need to do some reflection on, a new aspect of yourself that you want to explore. Okay, how are we doing on time? All right, I think we have time for another couple texts. We can skip that one, I think. Actually, that one is a very interesting point. And we're gonna skip down to the yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, so yeah, go down the English for this. So we'll end with this parable from the Baal Shem Tov. And then we'll have some closing reflections. So I think key to the shofar is its crudeness, its simplicity. I think also its animalistic nature. Right? It's literally made out of an animal horn. There's something visceral about that. But also, it touches something animalistic inside of us. The sound, it's guttural. Right? It hits you in the knot of your gut. It's pre-reflective. Right? It's not pretty. It's not an object for us to consider in a sense, like, oh, to think about that Mozart symphony or what have you. But it's actually a sound that affects us at a much more basic level, elemental level. And why is that? I think it's because there's something that it's supposed to be unlocking inside of us that is that basic, that elemental. Blowing the shofar, says the Baal Shem Tov. Actually, I think this is the Rebbe. This is the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe. Blowing the shofar is the essence of the simple sound, the primeval cry from within the depths of the heart, born out of one's feeling of distance from the one God. So there's something deeply pathetic, like pathos-y, right? There's a lot of deep feeling in the shofar sound. It is a guttural cry out. You know, it's like you're sitting and you hear someone scream, right? And immediately grabs your attention. You hear a baby cry. How is something that small so loud, right? But I mean, on one hand, it's loud, yes. But on the other hand, also, I think the reason it's so hard to ignore a baby, besides evolution, you know, protecting an infant, etc., is also, or the reason evolution does this, so we're so attentive to it, is because the sound is just like pure feeling. It's pure, immediate feeling. There's nothing in it but that sound, that just guttural cry. It's so inside of itself. It's so compelling. That's the shofar. And not only that, but I think, now we'll get to that after the parable. Okay, so the Baal Shem Tov has a really powerful parable about this. The parable is this. King has a son. King has a child. The king wants the child to get a PhD, right? Wants to get a good education, master different fields of knowledge, and to experience various cultures, you know, the modern multicultural university, blah, blah. So the king sends the child off to a far off country, study abroad, and gives, you know, puts a lot of money in the bank account, make sure that this child has everything the child needs, money, etc. But far away from home, the child, you know, first time off on their own, like many of us, immediately makes mistakes, right? Spends all the money on nonsense, left completely broke, and feeling totally just broken up about it, the child decides to return to their hometown. And it takes a long time, and it's very hard. But finally, the child's able to wend their way back to the courtyard of the palace where they grew up. However, the journey was so hard, and the distance was so impactful, that the child actually forgot how to speak their native language. Maybe that's hard to bear. Why don't you say the child forgot the customs of the land, right? Forgot how to behave in the appropriate way that they would have behaved in their hometown. And they were unable then to identify themselves to the guards. The guards wouldn't believe that this is the royal scion. How could the child of the king be such a shmendrik, a schmo, a bum? In utter despair, the child begins to cry out in a loud voice, pre-language, doesn't know the language anymore. All he can do is cry. And the king recognizes the voice of the child and goes out of the palace, collects the child, brings the child back in, kissing and hugging reunited again. Okay, no cheating yet. No cheating yet. So that was the mashal. A nimshal. Who's the king? God. Yedoi. Who's the child?
The Jewish people.
Us. Great.
I'm
Good.
Yisrael.
Chai. Okay. What's the university? Use your words.
Just the world and
Okay, great. Okay, good point. So then how do we come back? You say die? Oh.
We cry out. We cry out to
Oh,
God.
that's the mechanism. Yeah. Wait, no, but I mean, in coming back, I mean, what's this coming back? I mean, it could be die. It could be dying. If the university is the world, it would be dying. Okay, it's worldliness. Okay, how do we return from worldliness? How do we return to the source of, intimate connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu? Good. Okay. Who are the gatekeepers?
Angels?
It might be. It could be angels. But I'm wondering what it is in like everyday life gatekeeping. Like what are the things in our lives that keep us from doing tshuva?
Shame.
Okay. That's definitely very possible.
All the distractions of life. You get involved in life, you get involved in secular life, and it just, you're too involved in that to be involved in the spiritual side.
Right. And yet the king wanted us to go into the world. It's a challenge. This is complex. This is something mushals are not simple. They seem like, oh, it's a fairy tale. There's some complexity here. Shame, let's say ignorance maybe, or a certain kind of coarsening from a culture that doesn't prioritize holiness or prioritize godliness. Sure. Something is keeping us from reconnecting.
Ourselves.
Ourselves, something in ourselves for sure.
But isn't like when you say like the father wanted the son to go out into the university and learn, like, isn't that sort of part of like God created us because he wanted us to choose? Like the angels didn't have a choice, but we get to choose. Like, so is that sort of where you're going?
Well, I don't know. We'll find out. I have no idea where I'm going. I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. The question is, what does he mean? Like, what's he getting at? Who cares what I think? Let's see what the Baal Shem Tov is getting at. Choice is definitely, but not yet. No cheating. Okay. No, but I think you're quite right about choice, right? Angels famously can't choose. Angels are like F, open parentheses, God, close parentheses, right? It is a function of God's will. That's what an angel is. God has something that wants to happen. The angel emerges from the river of fire, does the thing, and then returns the river of fire, just reincorporated into divinity. Human beings are bochrim. We're choosers. We make choice. We're balei bechira, right? We are creatures who are defined by our ability to have free will for choice. Absolutely right. And not only that, but we saw that actually to expect change to just occur to us. The shofar awakens us, yes, but we saw that that Teshuvah requires our intentionality. It requires our minds and our souls that are now awakened to recommit ourselves to renewing our lives as in Days of Old, right? Committing ourselves to the renewing of our commitments to ourselves, exploring new aspects of ourselves, right? Change doesn't just happen to us. Change is a practice. Teshuvah is a practice. It's practice that asks something from us. And not just that, but if we were to stay in our, it's kind of like it's like kind of a Freudian thing, right? If we were to stay in our parental abode forever, never cutting the apron strings, we never individuate. We never become ourselves. We need to leave the nest to be able to separate from our parents, even from God in a sense, to become ourselves so that then whoever we are can return. If we were to stay in the palace forever, we would learn nothing. We would never have responsibilities. We would never have opportunities to choose right or wrong. We need to leave the palace. We even, in a sense, need to go astray to learn what it means to come back. Now, that being said, and I think this is something that's really powerful and quite surprising, we don't go to the university, get our PhD in world, and then come back and then earn our way home. We go out, we slip up, we go broke, we like drag ourselves back home, and then somehow manage to get back inside. But fascinatingly and surprisingly, and I think quite tellingly, it's not through anything that we were able to intentionally do, but it's because of the nature of the relationship that it's able to be reactivated. We don't need to earn our way back in, because if we did, we would forever be kept out. The gatekeepers can't understand us anymore. But what can God still understand? It's the sound of our
cry. Our cry.
sound of our cry.
They are asking for help. Yeah.
And it's not even just our asking. It's not a petition. It's the fact that we're asking. The sound of us asking impacts God. Kivyah. The pathetic, when I say pathetic, I don't mean like you're pathetic. I mean pathos infused, right? Just the core, the primordial core of the cry, of evidence that we are in need, that we need help, that we're in pain. That is the essence of the shofar. That's why the shofar is not a skillful instrument. Sorry, it takes a certain kind of skill to blow the shofar. But the blowing of the shofar is forceful. It is not delicate. It makes the sound of our guts. This is actually the same logic that Hasidus uses regarding nigunim, wordless songs. It's not magic spells. It's not a certain combination of carefully composed words, poetry, that if you say the right thing, le mot juste, it'll move God. It's in the failure of language that we are able to reach that source. Because no words can ever encompass the depth of that feeling. The limits of language are articulated. Something that is before and beyond language. The shofar, we are the shofar in Elul. We turn ourselves into a shofar. The key is to dig down really deep. We've been jostled. Things have been stirred up. Our hearts have been broken open so we can go inside to dig in deep and find that core, expose it. And that's courage. To cry out like you need it. To vulnerably reveal yourself. To expose yourself as being in need. To admit to yourself that you need help. It is the asking that is the point, not what is asked. The plaintive notes of the shofar of our voices as we cry out in frustration, in desperation. Those are hopeful gestures. Those are prayerful gestures, because we are articulating that there is something else on the other side. There is someone who cares, that we are worthy of that care. And it is worthwhile for us to commit ourselves to it. The king leaves the palace to go and pick us up. The Alter Rebbe of Chabad, the first Rebbe of Chabad, famously said that during Elul, the king is in the field. The king is in the field to pick us up, to find us and help us come home. So as we are jostled awake during Elul, hearing the shofar wake us from our slumber, the key is then to reconnect with that awoken self in concert with God's presence, God's supportive insistence that we can do this. That it is not to think of tshuva as something we need to do to earn our way back, is missing that the key of tshuva is to take the first step and to open your mouth and cry. So I wish us all that courage and that resilience to begin to initiate that process. We'll be exploring other aspects of Teshuvah the next 3 weeks. Same bat time, same bat channel. Please tell friends, people that you think might be interested or might be curious about checking out these classes. It's really a pleasure and a privilege for me to be able to give them over. We have Kabbalah Shabbos tomorrow at 7 o'clock, new time, 7 o'clock on Zoom. We have Shabbos morning services if you live in the area, Eglinton and Spadina area. But you have to sign up ahead of time. That form is on the Bethlita website, bethlita.ca. And there will also be some learning. I have to plan it out, but there will be some in person, and so I think also I'll try to simulcast it online to do some deep dives into select prayers from Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. If you have some requests, please feel free to reach out, and we can put it in the docket, kind of like what we were doing with the kind of classes on the Seder that we were doing before Passover, to get, use the machzor as a toolbox. So prayers that you want to explore, please hit me up and I'll make sure to slot them in and prepare them. Really big zechus to learn with all of you, and thank you so much for joining.
Josh, I
Thank
have
you.
a quick question.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Please.
So I think, like, I don't know for other people, but like personally, I guess I'm not too familiar with the concept in the first place, just sort of like more so from, I guess, growing up knowing Christianity, how that whole concept of repentance and return was connected to the concept of original sin. But then I know 100% that Judaism doesn't have that whatsoever. So then is Teshuvah sort of like returning, like why, like what's the original Teshuvah, I guess, is what I was wondering.
I mean, Teshuvah is.
Does that make?
Yeah. I mean, we'll look at these psukim. I think this was kind of like about Elul and like kind of the setting of Teshuvah, the spark of Teshuvah. We'll be looking more at like Teshuvah as like practice, like what Teshuvah looks like, how you can really do it in the weeks to come. But it is as early a concept. I think we see at least its incipient form in the Torah. V'sham el Hashem levav, v'shav el Hashem. Right, return to God. We see that in Deuteronomy. I think there's a notion that Judaism is like religion of judgment, and I think it actually really misses the point that Judaism is actually first and foremost a religion of, I would say, forgiveness. Maybe more than forgiveness, I would say it's a religion of tshuva. really, because like you don't necessarily know that if you like hurt somebody, they'll forgive you. But what is still required of you is to work towards that forgiveness,
Right.
to take ownership and accountability for what you've done, and to try to make the repairs that need to be made. But it is the case though with God that if Teshuvah is done authentically, if you really genuinely repent and you regret what you did and you commit to changing yourself, God accepts you. God accepts that.
Right.
That's not like a doing away of the harm or the mistake that you've done. It is the healing of that.
And it's not really connected to us being inherently bad, as in like having some inherently negative or sinful trait, but just connected to being like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, there's not I would say it's not the normative perspective that there's not original sin in Judaism per se. I think what we are,
Right.
But after Eden, though, we are, I think, human.
Right. Okay.
In everything that
makes
means.
sense. That makes sense. Awesome. Well, I'll try to find some people too.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, no pressure. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Great night, and good luck to you all. Chizuk and strength. Chazak v'amatz. It takes courage and resilience, but I believe in all of us, and in this class hopefully will be a good space in which we can check in with each other about our practice of tshuva. Okay? Good chaydet. And shalom.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, of course. Yes, you can stop sharing there. Thank you. Great.